Hey there, Griff Hamlin here from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Welcome and thanks for joining me. In today's video, we're going to talk about utilizing the blues half step, which is a very common chord embellishment, I'll say. We're going to talk about how you can use that blues half step to add some tension to your soloing. Okay, so we're going to take the chord that we would normally do, but we're going to kind of play with that a little bit, and in the process, learn a little bit of jazzy stuff and maybe a new sound and kind of some cool stuff. So let me give you the background on what we're talking about here. If you're not already familiar with what I call the blues half step, a lot of times you'll hear, let's say, a blues in G, right? And 3 and 4, and right before it goes to the 4 chord, you'll hear that. So instead of going straight from G7 to C9, you'll hear a half step up, a C sharp 9. Okay? Well, here's the thing. If you take that C sharp 9, in jazz world, that is actually equivalent to what's called a G7 altered. And if you look at the notes, okay, if I take a C sharp 9, I have the C sharp bass note. We're going to forget about the bass note for the moment. What's most important is the third of the chord is an F, technically an E sharp, but whatever. And the 7th of the chord is that B natural. Okay? Well, the 3rd and 7th, and again in jazz world, and really in blues world too, are the most important notes of the chord. We have the root, we have the 3rd, we have the 7th. The 9th, in this case, is that D sharp up there. All right? Well, those notes, if I do in jazz, they have this thing called a tritone substitution. Okay, so notice that we had the F and the B, right? If I take that root note and move it from a C sharp to a G, that's called a flat 5 or a tritone. Notice that the 7th and 3rd are now the 3rd and 7th, but it's still an F and a B. The F is now the 7th, whereas here it was the 3rd. Okay, the B here was the 7th, now it's the 3rd of the chord. Okay, that right there, that move, that tritone substitution, is fundamentally why that blues half step works. Okay, at least in this situation. Now, you don't have to understand about the tritone substitution. You don't have to understand about all that kind of stuff, but I like to explain it where it's applicable in case you're interested in that. What you do gotta know, that's proper grammar, I'm sure. What you do gotta know is that instead of C sharp 9, we could have like this sort of G messed up chord. I call it G7 altered. All right? And in order to play an altered chord like this, something with like, you know, flat 9s and sharp 9s and sharp 5s and flat 5s and all these different kinds of sounds, there is a scale that is very much, we talked about the Lydian dominant scale in a previous video. This one is actually called or we talked about the Lydian dominant before. This one's called the altered dominant. Okay, the altered dominant, as it turns out, well, it's kind of exactly the same, but different. Here's what I mean. All right, so I'm going to move up to A for a minute just to make this a little bit easier to see on your fretboard. There's my A, right? Imagine if we just pretty much mess up every single note in the scale. There's the root, so A, B flat instead of B, it's a flat 9. C instead of B, which makes it a sharp 9, or a flatted 3rd, however you want to look at it. Then we have our regular 3rd, because remember it is a dominant 7th chord, so we got to have a 3rd. Then we have, so that C sharp, then we have a D sharp, which gives us like the sharp 11 or flat 5 sound, right? Then we have and F, or E sharp, however you want to look at it, which is like the sharp 5 sound. Then we have the G, which gives us the flat 7. So we still have a root, a third, and a flat 7. But every other note, the 9s and the 5s, are both all messed up. So A, B flat, C, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp or F, G, A. And then I can repeat that. B flat, C, C sharp, D sharp, F, G, A. B flat, C, C sharp. Now you notice that little right there? Okay, well, another way that you could look at this is instead of calling it the A alter dominant, we could call it the D sharp Lydian dominant. Because they are parallel, they're related to one another. They're what are called relative scales. So if you happen to watch my last video on the Lydian dominant sound, this is another way to play the Lydian dominant sound as well. But for our purposes, we're going to play what's called the altered dominant sound. Okay, so if I move that back down to G, right, and I G, A flat, B flat, B, C sharp, D sharp, F, G. Now, this is one of those things that if you practice this at home, and I hope that you will, without hearing any chords, it's going to sound like kind of a whole lot of wrong, okay? This scale is specifically for creating tension, okay? It creates tension. The idea of playing this C sharp 9 chord, right, is the same as playing like G7 sharp 5. Okay, we could even add the flat 9. You know, G7 sharp 5 flat 9, which looks like a very simple little chord, right? And in fact, with a G bass, it is. With a C sharp bass, it's C sharp 9. Now, again, you don't have to understand all that stuff, but what I'm trying to point out is how many little parallels, how many relationships there are between just this little cluster of notes that you might never have imagined were there, okay? But let's make it bonehead simple. Let's go as simple as we can possibly go. Here's what we do. We're playing a G. Right before we go to the 4 chord, we want to create a whole bunch of tension. And the way we create a whole bunch of tension is by playing a bunch of what are otherwise wrong notes. Flat 9s and sharp 9s, flat 5 and sharp 5. Okay? And the way we get to all those notes is this altered dominant sound. That's it in a nutshell. Okay? This is when we add tension and we resolve it properly, it sounds cool. When we add tension but we don't resolve it, it sounds like we played a bunch of wrong notes. So, in order to make this work, we have to resolve it properly. Used effectively, this is so cool. You know, again, guys like Robin Ford, Larry Carlton, you know, I don't know if I hear Matt Schofield do this a whole lot. Josh Smith, I definitely hear use this sound. There are plenty of players that use this sound, and they use it extremely effectively because they use it sparingly and they resolve it properly, and it's all in the resolution. All right, so let's take a look at an example. Let me show you what I mean. So in this lick, I'm assuming that you're coming into the G7, right? We're coming from earlier. This is our 4th measure of 4, you know, the 1 chord, right? 4th measure in a row. So I just started off with some little thing. Slide up to the B, grab the G and the D. It could be whatever you want. That is not the important part of this lick. And you'll see me, when I start demonstrating, you'll see I'll come into it a bunch of different ways. But notice that we're going to go right before the 4th beat. We're going to kind of pick up into the 4th beat with that note right there, which is right out of this C sharp 9 chord, right? That E flat, F, G sharp or A flat, B, B flat, G sharp or A flat again, F, and all of those come out of that G altered dominant sound. And then, right, a C9 chord comes, the top note on a C9 is that G. So that's where I'm gonna end. That's how I'm gonna serve this up. That's how I'm gonna wrap it up and make it sound okay. If I don't end here, if I end someplace bizarre, you're just not gonna like it. I don't know how else to put it. It's not gonna sound as good. So let me do a little with my looper here. I've got the change already in there. So here's the G. I'm just playing something. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And it sounds okay. All right, it's gonna go around again. 2. 1, 2, and 3 and 4 and 1. And when I wrap it up and serve it like that, it works out. And again, it's all in how you serve this up. Okay, it doesn't sound, super weird because the chord behind you is also doing that. You're playing, what the chord would be. So it's not like you're stepping super out of bounds. Now, if the band didn't play that chord, okay, let's say I'm gonna clear out the looper here. Let's say that instead we just had 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Right? So I never made that blues half step. But I can still pretend. And it doesn't bother you so much. Now, the band's not doing it. But I can still throw it in. And again, it won't tweak your ear too badly simply because of the fact that it's not an outrageous thing that we're doing. The band playing that half step is a perfectly normal thing. So just because we did it and the band didn't, your listeners aren't necessarily going to be like, that's weird, that's wrong. It's not. It's not an uncommon, strange thing that we're doing. Yes, it's more modern sounding. Yes, it's not necessarily super traditional. Yes, it has a little bit of a jazz element, but it also adds tension and release, which is one of the most powerful elements that your soloing can have. Period. End of story. All right. Let's take a look at one more example up an octave. I want to show you one more idea. 2, 3, 4. Okay, so again, I'm not going too far off the rails here, even though it might seem that way. All that is box 1. G major, slide into box 2. Absolutely nothing weird at all. So I'm sliding up to B, D, G, slide up to B, D, E, G. Nothing but box 1 into box 2 there. Okay, and then I'm just going to jump into that altered dominant sound. So you could call it G sharp or A flat, G, F, E flat, D sharp, C sharp, D flat, B flat, B, B flat, G sharp, G again, because the chord, that's a chord tone. And I went from G to C right there. You could go from G to B flat if you wanted, or G down to E, depending on how you want to outline that chord. It's totally up to you. Once you've hit the G, you've established you know, that it's a chord tone. Again, you've now just wrapped up this whole line. Sorry, wrong place. You just wrapped up all this mess. All that made it sound weird, you just wrapped it up by feeding that G. Okay, so if we put this in time, you know, it's just 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So even though I know that looks really complicated, a bunch of 16th notes all tied together, but it's still just 1 and 2 and you just play 2 notes with every count. So if I start my track again, 3 and 4 and 1. I didn't do that right. My bad. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that's just minor blues. You can play whatever you want. Again, it's totally up to you how you get into that, how you get out of that. But that little spot right there is such a cool place to add some tension. And you'll notice that I'm kind of harping on this spot right as the 1 chord goes into the 4 chord. It's you know, bar 4, bar 5. But you've just played the 1 chord for 4 bars. Or maybe, okay, you played the 4 chord in the 2nd bar because it's a quick change. But still, you've just had a lot of the same thing. It's a really ideal time to add some of this tension and then release it. And it really, really sounds cool. I don't know how else to put it. It's a lot more sophisticated. It takes that sophisticated meter and, you know, goes up about 10 steps. But it's really cool. It sounds like you know exactly what you're doing, and it's just a really fun sound. It might tweak your ear a little bit at first. I get that. But I promise you that when you get the hang of it, you'll start to hear it a little more out there in the real world. That's when it'll really become a sound that you can incorporate and you can call your own. So, as always, I hope you have enjoyed the video. I hope you play around with this. I know it's a new thing, but I hope you'll play with it. And this idea comes from a course I have called Modern Blues Soloing. If you want to check that out, I'll try to leave a link nearby. My name is Griff Hamlin from Blues Guitar Unleashed, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.